Beautiful. I'm gonna get this loading. Boom. What is up, everybody? I'm pumped up to chat tonight. We're talking with Amanda from SIRA. She'll explain what that is here in a second. But I'm excited. We met forever ago. I couldn't believe like the serendipity of us meeting. Actually, because you're not even from Kansas City. You were at an event here. Describe what you were at. That's a great intro and kind of how we met and how you got here and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so our mutual friend Abraham, who leads the Freedom Project, which is a great mental health organization, he came out with a mental health movie, so he was premiering it, and so I came to Kansas City to support him. And then I spoke on the panel talking about SIRA, which we'll get further into later. And so I met Cody there, and he gave me his card, and I emailed him, and the rest is history.
I can't believe it. It's just so crazy. I think about that sometimes when like we're about to do a workshop together, like we've been collabing. So it's kind of cool. But I'm pumped up. I would love for you to share a little bit about SIRA. Everybody kind of already knows based on like the title of what we're talking about today. We're talking about self-harm and specifically in relation to some of the work that you do. So I'd love for you to share anything about your story you'd like and also about SIRA, just to kind of get us started. Usually people take a minute to kind of jump in here and stuff. But if you're already on here, if you got questions as we go, drop them in the chat. I'll be looking. Otherwise, me and Amanda are going to be chatting.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. As Cody mentioned, my name is Amanda Beausoleil. I am the CEO of SIRA, which stands for Self-Injury Recovery Anonymous. It is a global peer support group helping people get through, recover, and have a community of those who understand their struggles with self-injury. I became part of this organization for my own personal lived experience, and I struggled with self-injury. I started cutting when I was 10, and then I didn't get help until I was about 23. I had just graduated. So 22, 23, I had just graduated college. And at that time, it was called SMA. And then we changed the name and rebranded a bit. So that was the first time I ever actively sought help that wasn't forced upon me to self-injury. And yeah, and I thought I would phase out of it because society kind of always told me, you know, it's just a teenage angst behavior issue, what have you, you'll grow out of it. And I'm from Texas. So by the time I went to college in New York, I'm in the fashion world. So I went to fashion school there, and I was in my apartment in New York, just graduated college, looking for jobs. And besides the regular stressors of life, everything was good. And I was still cutting all the time, and I couldn't figure out why. I'd been in therapy since I was 13. I had a great therapist, psychiatrist, family support, like you name it. I had a great support network. So I couldn't figure out why I was still engaging in this behavior. And one night I just had like a really bad episode, and I realized that 13 years had already passed by, and it happened quite quickly. As we all know, time flies. And so I just kind of thought to myself, what do the next 10 years look like? I eventually want a family and I want kids. And what if, God forbid, they walk in on me one day cutting and they pick it up, or they pick up some other form of self-injury because they think that's the best way to regulate your emotions, or that's how you show yourself love. That idea was something I couldn't live with myself if I didn't get myself help. So the embarrassment of needing help no longer outweighed the need of me needing help. So I didn't even know what to look up. I always hated the word self-harm. I think it's just because I was stereotyping myself so much that it just, I don't know. I can't even pinpoint it even today. It's just like made me cringe. The word made me cringe, but probably because I was I wanted to be so far removed from it. I didn't want to be put in a category. So I didn't even know what to type into the computer, but eventually I found a peer support group that met in New York. It was the only one I could find, and it happened to be in New York. So I thought it was definitely a sign. So I was debating whether to go. I thought everyone, again, stereotyping, I thought everyone would be quote unquote weird, even though like we're all weird. There's no such, when people say like normal, I'm like, what does that even mean? Like,
right.
It doesn't exist. But I just thought I wouldn't relate to anybody. And so when I went in, I was shocked that one, it was men and women of all ages, from young adults to literally senior citizens, people that are PhD students to engineers, dancers, creatives, lawyers, like just really any and everyone you could think of. And I was so shocked by the diversity. And I was shocked by the shares. And I felt like they were reading my thoughts, because I thought to myself, I've literally thought this and I just thought I was crazy.
When you say the shares, like what they're sharing, or
sorry, yep, just them talking about their struggles. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, no worries, I was just wanting to clarify.
And I was just really blown away, and I left the first meeting and I called my parents, my sister, my brother-in-law, like had them all on a conference call, because I didn't tell anyone I was going, just so it gave me room to back out. I love it. Yeah, I called them, and I remember it was freezing cold outside because it was a cold winter New York day, and I was just standing in the snow, and I remember like not even feeling cold because I was so excited about what had just happened. And I just started crying on the phone to them, told them where I went and how amazing it was. And it was the first time I felt the weight of self-injury, because it was the first time I felt it lifted. So I didn't even notice how much it was weighing me down until the moment it lifted. And it was the first time I realized I was going to be okay. And that was a very profound moment for me. I just assumed I would live with self-injury forever, and it would just be a part of me, because it really had been like my best friend and a partner to me. I had to realize that was the first relationship I've ever had. It wasn't with a person, but it was with self-injury. And yeah, that moment was a very surreal moment. And I eventually stopped cutting. I don't like to count, and we can get into that later. I know some people like to. I'm not one of them. It just feeds into the perfectionism in me, and it feeds into like the old athlete in me, where I just want a trophy and applause. So I was focusing less on internal work, and I was focusing more on external like accolades. But I'm around like between 5 and 7 years. It's somewhere in that time frame.
I love that. That's one of my favorite things when people quit smoking or drinking or anything like that. And they're like, oh, I'm 10 days sober. I'm like, why are you counting, bro? Yeah. What are you counting for here? So I'd love to hear that you have that mentality. That's awesome.
Yeah. And like I said, we can go into that later and how I got to that place, because I did start counting in the beginning, because I didn't know anything about like recovery or like what to do. So I was just following what other people did. And then I just realized you can make up your own, because your recovery journey is only for you. So it can be whatever it looks like for you and what's best for you.
Nice.
But yeah, so it took a couple of years to just get myself sorted and get comfortable with not cutting anymore, because that's also a journey, because you miss it in a way too, which is totally normal. I think people, especially when you get help, especially from professionals, at least in my experience, you're always taught that it's bad and that you shouldn't do it. And that's just a very obvious thing. Like, we know we shouldn't do it, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do it. And it's easier said than done. But really acknowledging that what you liked about it and that it was helpful. And even though it's a maladaptive coping mechanism, it helped keep me alive. It was a strategy where I could like do it, wake up and put a smile on my face. That was my version of white knuckling through life. So once I acknowledged that, it did have benefits. If it didn't have benefits, people want to go back to it.
Right. And it's interesting. There's like neurological underpinnings for what you're describing. And that's, everybody knows that I love the brain. So, but that's,
it raises your dopamine and serotonin. And then that's what you're conditioning your brain. Conditioning your brain to think it's something positive because you're feeling positive endorphins. So then you're going to go back to it again. And that's how you're conditioning those urges to keep coming back.
Right. So it's just like any other addiction, like if you want to use that word, but it's when you look at the brain, the brain scans, it's very similar pathways being lit up in reaction to some of these things. Some people have binge eating problems. Some people have drug problems, alcohol problems. Same neural networks, same brain structures lighten up in these things. So I feel like that can help build some understanding. I'm like, what do you mean it felt good? And like, you want to do it and you miss it, that kind of stuff. It's like,
exactly.
I miss ice cream and I don't get to eat it. Like it's a normal thing. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. And the whole addiction word, I always say, like, whatever helps you. If you want to call it an addiction, okay.
Okay.
If you don't, then don't. Because I know some doctors, like experts in NSSI, so the technical term non-suicidal self-injury. Some
I want
see,
to talk about that.
yes, some see it as an addiction, others don't. Others say there's needs to be more research because it's in the back of the DSM saying further research needed versus in the front of the DSM. So,
Mhm.
but then people in our group, it helps them to identify it as an addiction. I would say in my recovery in the beginning, it helped calling it that, just because it made me feel in a way more validated, like, oh, this is a big issue, like this is a real problem. But as I continued on in my journey, I wouldn't consider an addiction for me. And I can only speak for myself. Just because I just see it as a maladaptive coping mechanism and a behavior that I used to do. I don't see it as an addiction for me. And I think that
Gotcha.
was the only word I knew back in the day. So that was just the easiest thing to reference or call it. But I say do whatever you want.
Fair. I like that. I like that vibe, and I like the pulling the guilt and the shame and those types of feelings away from these types of topics. I feel like when things are taboo, it's almost always like it just almost doesn't lead to good things almost ever, I feel like. So it's a lot. It's kind of funny. My therapist was talking the other day. He's like, because I grew up Catholic, so there's all sorts of like religious type of guilt, shame things, that all the stuff. And he was just talking about how like the last six people we've seen had like religious stuff that they were working through, and it's like holy crap. But a lot of those under the religious stuff is like guilt and shame and fear and like I'm going to hell, like those types of feelings, and it produces messed up stuff mentally, I feel like. And I feel like some of those types of things are, or maybe I'll leave it to you. Could you talk a little bit about like the guilt and the shame and those parts, maybe, or any other emotions that are in relation to self-harm, self-injury?
Well, I'm no Brene Brown, but
Hey, I love Brene Brown.
right. And she's from Houston. I'm from Houston. So
Okay, I forget about it.
for, like I said, I'm only going to talk for myself when it comes to like shame and guilt, but you're on the hamster wheel a lot when
Okay,
you're,
describe the hamster wheel, if you would, please.
yeah. So the hamster wheel, the best way for me to explain it is something happens in the day where, it spikes up your anxiety or your depression or what have you, whatever is going on in your brain that you feel like you're about to combust and you can't handle. So you're going to this place, and for someone that self-injures, for me, I'd be like, okay, I can try other things, but it never works. It just makes me more angry. And then I end up going to self-injury. So I might as well just start with self-injury in the first place. Because back in the day, that's how I always felt. I was like, I tried things that didn't work. Like, screw it. I just wasted all these hours when I could have just already been done with the whole thing.
Mhm.
Just to be completely honest. And so then I would feel great, get those endorphins. And then I would feel guilty for doing it. And I think all of the shame and guilt was more about external eyes on it and thoughts
Mm.
versus me personally. I think the only shame I felt for myself is like, wow, I hate myself that much. But I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't realize how strong my self-hatred was until I got into recovery, where I could unpack it and I had to learn self-love. And I realized my self-love level was like negative. It was like below. So I really had to build it up. So going into, I felt shameful for just being disgusted by myself for doing it in the first place, for always going back to it, not feeling like I had any like power, discipline, or anything. I was like, wow, I can't get myself to just stop. Like, why?
Right.
And so it made me feel like an idiot. And then the shame of having to cover it up, and you go through that whole process. And I was a cheerleader growing up, so I was always in a uniform. So you wear, I mean, depending on the uniform and all that stuff. But some, like my school uniform was sleeveless. My competitive uniform was long sleeve. So I was like, perfect. But when I was in school,
Right.
that uniform, it was sleeveless. And so everyone could see it. And then I'd feel so embarrassed but then the embarrassment kind of turned, I think I somehow weirdly turned it into like, I'm not, can we curse on here?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I was like, I'm not going to give a fuck. And that was like the mentality I had to cover up the shame. I just acted like I didn't care.
Mm.
Just so I wouldn't beat myself down more because I was already beating myself down. So I think you go through that wheel of like, I need this, I'm feeling crazy, I'm going to combust, to like, oh my gosh, I feel good, to, oh my gosh, what did I do? I feel like shit. I feel guilty. Everyone's going to see this. Everyone's going to be mad at me. My parents are going to be mad at me. People are going to ask why I signed this contract with my therapist that I wouldn't do it or whatever. So then I'm letting them down. And then it's just going to keep going over and over. And then I'm like, I'm not going to do it again. And then the time comes again where you do it again and you go through the whole thing.
Damn, yeah, that's a wheel that I've one that I've seen a lot in the research I've done around like these types of things, self-harm, self-injury, and just guilt and shame in general. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I love wheels. So I wanted you to be able to share that. I talk, there's so many, you'll see.
That wasn't articulate at all, but that's the best
No,
way to
that was beautiful.
frame
I
it.
thought it was awesome. Yeah, I thought that was great. Okay, so these wheels, your own personal journey. Tell us a little bit more about like SIRA. What does SIRA do? Like, what's day to day look like? If you're a SIRA member, your first experience was awesome. Where are you at today? What's SIRA like? Tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah. So today, SIRA is a 501c3 nonprofit. We have 4 meetings a week on Saturdays, Sundays, and Wednesdays. We have 2 on Saturdays. And then we have a youth group meeting once a month on Monday, the 3rd Monday. And it's the teens run it, host it, create the whole structure of it. And then there's
cool.
there's always an adult supervisor present, and it's usually me, but I don't talk, like the adults never talk in the group. We just are there to make sure everything's okay. And so those are the support groups that we have. We'd love to have more, but all of our work is volunteer based. So everybody that hosts a meeting is a member. We also have a group chat where you have to attend 4 meetings before getting a link to be invited to the group chat. And then,
Nice.
and then you have to be 18 or older to join the group chat as well. But that has been I think it's one main thing where when I started the group chat, I really didn't think it was going to be anything. And it's really become its own entity because people use
Nice.
24/7 and we're all around the world. So a lot of people will reach out at weird hours, but odds are it's not a weird hour for somebody else. So there's always somebody responding to everyone. No one's ever left on red, so to speak.
That's the best. It's like the network effects kind of take over, and there's always we're all looking at each other's backs.
Yeah. And so people, if they need help or they're having urges, they'll just ask, like, is someone available? And then someone will be like, I'm available. And then they'll call each other or text. And then we put all of our work announcements in there, our schedules, so people can put their name to host, put our monthly schedules, kind of put everything in there. Also like affirmations or celebrations, wins for people. It's kind of any and everything. So it's really become its own community, that like a second leg to SIRA in our meetings, which has been really great. And then
that's badass.
Yeah. And then we also have our own literature that we wrote about 2-3 years ago. It was at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was about 7 of us that got together. I wanted to make sure it was people that had all different forms of self-injury. It wasn't just people that cut or people that burn. It was just like a good diverse group, because I realized while writing the literature, we all thought differently. The people that engaged in cutting versus the people that engaged in burning or picking or pulling,
That's an interesting point. I don't know that many people, I feel like most people hear self-harm, self-injury, and it's cutting, but there's tons of different types that would be categorized underneath this.
Yeah. One doctor or counselor, she's one of our advisors, I think she said she's counted up to over 27 or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it was a very large number, definitely over 20 types of self-injury. And I didn't.
So it's more than one thing.
Yeah. And I didn't realize the mindset was a bit different. until we started writing the literature. And it was really just a writing workshop in a way, that we met once a week for about 3 hours. And then we had different topics. And then we were kind of going through the entire process of like, all right, how do you feel when you're about to self-injure? What's happening during self-injury, what's happening after, and then kind of like the hamster wheel. And we all explained our own hamster wheels. And then we worked through that to say, okay, what would you want to know? Or what would you have liked to know? What would you want to tell other people? And that's kind of how our literature came about. And it's called Layers to Discovery. So they're guiding questions. So you get to the root of the problem on your own. We're not there to, spoon feed you or, tell you do this, do that. No, it's your own process, your own journey. We're here to help
Nice.
you, give you resources, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to help yourself. And I just truly believe that when you have the right people around you, then you have all the resources you need and tools to do it on your own, because you're not really on your own, but you still need to get to that answer on your own, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I love that. That's awesome. I like it. Real quick, if you guys have questions for Amanda or for me or anything, drop them in the chat. I want to remind you that you can do that as we're kind of going here. We're just kind of vibing. So if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat. This has been fun. I'm having a great time. So among the meetings and all the other things SIRA does, you also have, you invite people to come speak. And so that's what actually prompted us to throw a couple of these lives. We're going to have Amanda on next week and the week after that as well, leading up to February 22nd. Do you want to talk a little bit maybe about some of the other workshops and things that you've done? And then we can talk about the one that we're throwing together as well. But just highlight some of the other people you have to talk or different things like that, or what those workshops are like.
Yeah, I love our workshops. They used to scare me. I put them together and I was like, what if nobody comes? What if they don't like the people that I'm like getting to like come do a workshop for us? But they've really become part of our who we are, in a big imprint of who we are, which is really exciting. And I would say they've all been amazing, but to highlight a few, we just had a gratitude workshop with Chris Shembra. He's called the Gratitude Guru. He's
Nice.
amazing.
I
And
love
he
that.
works with a bunch of corporations, Fortune 500 companies. He's a writer for Rolling Stone. He has his own
Damn.
book. He's amazing. And I highly recommend looking it up. It's called 747 Gratitude, his company.
Yes, I just saw this. I just connected with this without even knowing that you were going to say this. That's crazy.
Really?
Yeah, literally. It's nuts. I just got connected with 747 Gratitude. They reached out for something. I don't know what it was, but that's just crazy. Like
Oh my
serendipity.
gosh. I was just at Chris's house like 2 weeks ago for his Shabbat dinner, and I was with his girlfriend for dinner yesterday. So I can connect y'all.
That's insane. I can't believe. Okay, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. Amanda Amanda and
Um,
I have lots of strange connections happen all the time. So that's
um,
cool.
but that was an
Talk a
amazing
little bit more
workshop.
about the you go, sorry.
And that you need to try. You will cry. I promise you will cry. I told him I have to stop going to stuff because I always end up crying, but in the best way possible. But another great workshop, we had Natasha Azizi, I just call her Tasha, but she is an Ayurvedic coach. She's also, I just call her a healer. I always tell people I don't know how to really describe her. You just have to experience her presence.
That's the best, honestly.
She's just a healer. And so at our workshop, she focused on embodiment practices to ease the nervous system. So she had everyone doing all these, it feels silly, but it really does help your nervous system. Like when everyone started, everyone was kind of down. And then by the end, everyone's spirits were lifted. And she showed practices of what to do if you're in public. So it's not very obvious that, you're trying to calm yourself down. And then if you're at home, you can get a little bit more wild and shake and do crazy things and hum. So that was a great workshop, embodiment practices. We also had Busy Gold of Break Method. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She had a workshop.
Yes. You connected us, or you introduced us.
Oh, nice. And she's one of our advisors on our advisory board. She's amazing. She works on repatterning the brain and breaking cycles. And her work is amazingly crazy. Like when I read it and was doing it for myself, I was just like, whoa, like it's amazing how she put all of that together in her workbook and literature and everything she's doing in schools and beyond. So I would say those are some of our highlight workshops.
Hell yeah, I'm pumped. I'm
And
excited. Now I'm like, holy crap, I'm sweating bullets over here. I don't know if I'm worthy of the stage. I guess I need to probably talk to some of your other guests. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to hop on. We've got a workshop. Let me put this in the chat, Riley. If you guys want to sign up for this, I'm going to put the link to sign up for this actually. But we're going to talk about something called IFS when we hop on, internal family systems, which is a form of psychotherapy or a methodology of psychotherapy that is kind of interesting. And it talks about how you have multiple parts, and these self-harm parts, these are a type of part that we'll talk about called firefighters. And so I'm excited for that. It's February 22nd at
7 p.m.
Eastern time. Yeah, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And anybody can come, correct?
Yep. Anybody can come, but it will be geared towards self-injury. So that will be the topic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it'd be a good time. I'm excited. And if you guys want to sign up for that, I just dropped the link. I'll drop it a couple more times in here so everybody can always see it. But I'm pumped up to go talk about that. And we're going to talk about befriending these parts of us, which would be kind of fun. I like some of the other things you talked about already, though, like the body work, especially, and getting into your body, grounding your body. If you're humming, you're probably getting your vagus nerve rolling on some of those types of things. So that'd be exciting. I'm pumped to be able to jump on. Something you talked about earlier that I wanted to hit on just real quick was NSSI. Could you dive a little bit deeper into that? And then could you talk about the difference between and how, because I feel like the other thing people think a lot about is self-harm equals suicide or leads to suicide, or I just feel like they're interconnected when they're not necessarily, from the research I've done. But I'd love to hear it from you as well on your experience in this realm.
Yep. So non-suicidal self-injury, or NSSI, is the technical term for self-injury. I would say if you want to read more, because it's kind of like a 4-part definition. If you want to read more about it, go to itriples.org. They have a great definition. itriples is a self-injury research society. So they're always staying up to date on all things self-injury research. But in a nutshell, non-suicidal self-injury talks about and defines it as physical harm to the body, to really put it in a nutshell. So meaning that if you are not breaking skin, then it's not considered self-injury. So a lot of people will call self-injury self-harm and use both terms. I like to say self-injury because the self-harm umbrella is quite big. For example, an eating disorder is considered self-harm, but it's not considered self-injury because it's not breaking skin. It's not physically causing harm to your body immediate. It's about immediate pain, immediate destruction to your body. Whereas an eating disorder, it's causing harm to your body, but it's a buildup over time. So if it's not immediate destruction to your body, then it wouldn't be considered self-injury. Also, something else that wouldn't be considered self-injury is destructive behavior. Self-injury and destructive behavior are two different things. So if you're doing crazy sports to get hurt, or if you're driving recklessly by not wearing a seatbelt, hoping somehow you get hurt, that wouldn't be considered self-injury.
Got it. Okay. I'm glad I asked this question.
So even though you can't, like, society knows self-injury as self-harm, and I know plenty of people that say self-harm, I personally like to use self-injury just because it's very defined and you know exactly what I'm talking about once I explain it, and you can't confuse it with any other type of self-harm. I'm talking about physical destruction to the body in order to regulate your emotions. So I would say that is kind of it in a nutshell. Again, there's like a 4-part definition on itriples.org that they explain it beautifully and way better than I can. And then the important part of that term is non-suicidal, because a lot of people used to think if you're cutting yourself or engaging in some type of self-injury, then you're trying to kill yourself, which isn't the case. If anything, you're trying really hard to survive. I'll have a lot of parents email me saying that their child is engaging in self-injury and they're like, oh my God, they're trying to kill themselves. They're attempting suicide. Then I ask, well, what was the suicide attempt? And they say they're cutting themselves. And I say, okay, no, they're not. At least they're not trying to kill themselves in that way. Because if they're just continuing to cut, then they're just trying to regulate their emotions. I'm not saying they don't have suicidal ideation or they haven't attempted or they're not going to attempt. I'm just saying that behavior isn't what they're doing to attempt suicide. I've had 3 suicide attempts and I've never used self-injury to kill myself. I've always used other methodologies because I was kind of like protective over my self-injury. I was like, no, this is for living. This is for surviving. That isn't for killing. But there is a high correlation between self-injury and suicide. Statistically, people that engage in self-injury have a higher likelihood of suicide ideation, attempting suicide, or completing suicide. So even though self-injury is different than suicide, there is a high correlation between the two. But that doesn't mean if someone's cutting, they're trying to kill themselves. If anything, it's the opposite most times.
Got it. So it's interesting you bring up the parents thing, because in all the stuff that we do, because I work a ton with anxiety, depression, and like suicidal thoughts, suicide ideation is, especially I see a lot with depression, stuff that pops up in the conversations I have with people and the clients I work with. And I get a lot of questions from, and if this is a too intensive one, feel free to let you guys throw it back. But any tips and tricks for parents in relation to, like, what are some of the things you email them back? Like, what are some of the things that a parent could do? It's like one of the top questions I get is parents asking about their kids. So you brought it up. I'd love any of your feedback or thoughts on that.
So actually, real quick before I answer it, can I put something in the chat? Will everyone see
Yeah.
it? Okay.
I'll paste it in there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just putting the overall definition of NSSI. So I put in the chat, non-suicidal self-injury is the deliberate self-directed damage of body tissue without suicidal intent and for purposes not socially or culturally sanctioned.
Got it. Okay.
And then, thanks. And then, so what I say to parents, I say, one, they're not attempting suicide in that way if they have continued to self-injure and it's a pattern and they're using it to cope. And I explain how they're trying to regulate their emotions through self-injury. And I don't talk about whether they're suicidal or not, because I have no idea. And I'm not a professional. I'm not a doctor. It's not my place. And then I give them resources. One, I give them SIRA's information so they can come to a meeting. 2, I'll give them itriples.org. So that's more so for the parents so they can learn. Also, I mean, if the child wants to learn too, amazing, because that's actually what helped me a lot in my recovery was learning about self-injury. So I could kind of connect dots. But that's iTriples is a great place for information about it. And then Cornell University's recovery and resources for self-injury website, which is also they have a research center there, is amazing. They have, again, more information on it. They also have worksheets and recovery tools. And some of their worksheets is for family to do together. So it's for the child that's engaging in behavior and then the parents too. So you can actually look at the family life as a whole as well and see how that's playing a part. So they have great resources as well. So those are the top ones I usually send. I also send the Institute of NSSI. A woman named Lori Van is the founder of it. She's a counselor and she also gives coaching sessions to caregivers and then kids 16 years and up. So those are the main resources I give.
Dang, that's awesome. I like that. So in that you had talked about when you were younger, some of the guys, as you were learning about self-harm, self-injury, some of the dots that were connecting. Do you have one that was like one of the most profound, like aha moments for you personally in that journey or in those realizations?
The pain relief theory. So basically describing how the brain works, we were talking about how you're getting those endorphins and how you're conditioning your brain to think it's something positive. And with the pain relief theory, it talks about how pain isn't the reason you're going to it, which I, even as someone that engaged in it, thought, oh, I like pain. That's why I'm going to it, because I like the pain, but it's the relief after. So they kind of show like the hill of it. And yes, pain is at the top of the hill, but the benefits you're getting is when it's that release and the come down of it. So people always think, oh, you must like pain if you're engaging in self-injury, but that's not necessarily the case. What's bringing you back to it is the relief you're feeling after the pain. So it's called offset
Gotcha.
relief theory.
Got it. So when you learned that, what was the big moment for you? What happened in what clicked for you that was like, or how did that help you?
It helps me talk myself through it and really I'm like a geek with the brain too. So like, as long as I can understand the fundamentals of it, then I can kind of work backwards and say like, okay, if this is happening, I know what's going to happen in the future in this scenario of this cycle. So before I get to the good part and the relief, let me think about what's going to come after. I kind of am able to work through the whole scenario so I don't go into it and figure out different ways, because I know what I'm going to get when I engage in the behavior and I know what I'm looking for. So being able to recognize that and then find something else or do something else that's going to get me to that same place in a healthy way was really helpful. And also it gave me validation because it made me realize it wasn't just me like, oh, I should just be able to stop. I was like, oh, my brain is literally thinking this is a good thing and it's giving me benefits. So it's not just willpower.
Right. There's some type of secondary gain or like stuff coming that's coming in from it. So that's interesting. That's cool. Well, sweet. I appreciate being willing and vulnerable tonight, Brene Brown, sharing with us all the things that you guys are working on at SIRA, all the things that you've been through, and what's happened with you in your life. I'm pumped to be able to hop on. Maybe next time we'll talk a little bit more about some of the topics and stuff that we might cover in the workshop and stuff. But if you guys have not already, make sure to go click the link that's in the chat to sign up for the workshop February 22nd. If you guys have questions for Amanda and you want to DM me or send a message to me and you have a question for Amanda or you want to connect with Amanda, I'll ask her right now. What would be the best way for them to reach out to you? And then if they DM me, I can connect them with you in the same way as well, whether it's email, text, whatever's easiest for you. What's best?
My email, the SIRA email that you have.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So I'll put that in the chat and then I will, if you guys have questions, sometimes I understand people hop on lives and then I get tons of messages after because they'd rather ask privately. So feel free to message me and I'd be happy to connect you with Amanda or Sierra and then sign up. Well, I'm pumped. We've got a workshop happening on the 22nd. So it'll be awesome. Is there anything that you want to leave the team with? Anything else that you think's prudent as we say goodbye?
I would just say if you are engaging in self-injury, know that it is possible to stop. You don't have to live with it forever. And if you know someone that engages in self-injury, or if you're a parent, I would say try to set aside the fear and bring compassion in, because that's what they need the most. Is they just need compassion. It doesn't matter if you don't understand, because they probably don't understand either. And you just need to make sure you're a cheerleader and you're just on their team.
100%. That's awesome. Couldn't think of a better way to end. So thank you so much. And we will see you guys back here next week. Amanda's gonna be hopping on again. So she'll be on the next couple of weeks to chat with us some more. So thank you so much for hopping on with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. And the workshop's going to